Once practice it, develop it, and let it rise in a stream of consciousness. As it said, bhavana bhavitava, as the Buddha has said, this bhavana is something to be developed. What is developed is what is to be developed is bhavana, or bhavana is to be developed. Bhavana bhavitava. And what is to be developed is this noble part of 8 constituents. When you do that, you are said to be practicing or cultivating this adi kusala, extraordinary skillfulness in your stream of consciousness. So don't choose any object, don't expect or anticipate some unusual, interesting, sensational object that you might come across in the course of the practice. Even if the object is just simple as rising and falling, even if the object is, whether the object is interesting or uninteresting, or very dull, these are the things, objects to be noted, and noted and known. And what is to be noted and known is dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering. So the truth of suffering is to be understood. Whatever arises in your body, you have to know and know it. That is, these are the objects, and these are known as the truth of suffering. And this direct, if you are noting this rising and falling, you are said to be noting this, the truth of suffering. So, not just when you're noting it, not just seeing one thing or one continuous thing, you will be seeing things in segments, and this is practicing sila, samadhi, panya. This is quite valuable, as we have discussed, the discriminative knowledge. So yogis are not to anticipate the sensational, new, unusual objects that may arise in your mind and body. If you don't note what arises in your body, thinking that they are uninteresting, then you will not be able to know it, not to become aware of it. Then you will be losing this noble part of 8 constituents. Whatever arises, the objects are to be noted. This will be practicing. This will amount to practicing the noble part of 8 constituents. So even if the objects are as simple and as ordinary, as commonplace as rising and falling, you should not ignore it. As the object is at a distance, it may not be so obvious, but as it goes, as you bring your noting mind closer and closer, it will become more and more obvious, more and more clearer and clearer. When it becomes clearest, or when it becomes closest, it will become very clear, and you'll be seeing the essential qualities, such as the sensation, stiffness, tension, movement, and so on, one by one, in segments. Not just one whole thing, but in segments, if you are dedicated. And in falling also, you'll be seeing things in segments. These are the sabhavas, and you are understanding the truth of suffering, dukkha sajja. So, rising and falling and other objects are things to be understood, that need to be noted and known, and things to be practiced, to be developed are the noble part of 8 constituents. They are to be developed. But of course, you don't have to fantasize or intellectualize in the course of the practice, but just note whatever arises immediately. Whatever should be noted, whatever should be noted, whatever is to be noted should be noted. So whatever arises, they are to be noted, so as to practice, so as to cultivate the noble part of 8 constituents, which are comprised of the 3 trainings, sila, samadhi, and panya. Therefore, dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering, is to be understood. and the Eightfold Path is to be developed. And if you develop Eightfold Path, if you note these truth of suffering, then you are also practicing the Eightfold Path automatically. So just practice mindfulness of every arising, whether they be interesting or uninteresting. They are all dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering. And whatever arises, whether the object is desirable object or undesirable object, interesting or uninteresting, they are the objects to be noted. And this is the responsibility of the yogis to do. Yogis' the only responsibility is to note whatever arises, and not to just devote your time or waste your time on imaginations, fantasies or intellectualization. Then there will be no guarantee of progress. Instead you work with the spirit of Satipatthana, as we have once discussed. When you are noting these objects, beginning with the main object of rising and falling, whatever arises in the body and whatever enters your six sense doors, whatever you see, hear things, hear, smell, taste, touch and so on, all these things are dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering, and they have to be noted at the moment of their arising. Then you are bound to see the realities, observe the realities, the true nature of things. Then when you know, there will be no unknowing, there will be no ignorance. If you are not aware of the object at the very moment, then you will not be able to distinguish between the noting mind and the noted object. The mind which knows it and the object to be noted, you will not be able to distinguish between the two. And then you will not be able to discriminate the conditionality, whether that body causes mind or mind causes the body and so on, and not be aware of the arising object and the vanishing of the object. So you are not seeing the truth. If you don't see the truth, then whatever you see here, taste, touch and so on, will be seen as pleasurable and it's good and desirable. You cling to them. Once you cling to them, then there will be this craving and clinging, tanha will arise. And this tanha, craving, desire is a state to be abandoned. Now you can abandon in two ways. One is not to let this tanha or craving or attachment to arise in the stream of consciousness. You just try to do that. That is one way. Another way is when the attachment or craving arises, you just note and abandon. Of these two, the first is better. That is noting in advance so that this craving and attachment will not arise in the stream of consciousness. This craving and attachment is samudaya sajja, the truth of origin or truth of the cause of suffering. So you have to abandon. This is something to be abandoned by not giving a chance to arise in your stream of consciousness. If you don't abandon, then you will cling to it. So the best thing is not to let the attachment to arise, not to become attached, and not to let your mind become attached to the object, not to give a chance to arise. So this is the origin of suffering. You are this craving is something to be abandoned. And now you are knowing what should be known, and you are abandoning, or you are understanding what should be understood, abandoning what should be understood, abandoning what should be abandoned, and In this way, you are also practicing at that moment the noble path of 8 constituents, which is to be developed. Yogi's responsibility is to know whatever arises in the body, beginning with the main object of rising and falling, which we call dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering. Energetically and precisely, taking an aim at the object and sustaining your mindfulness. Then you are about to observe the realities. You will be noting and knowing. So in this way you are able to understand dukkha sajja according to the formula that we have just discussed. Dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering, is to be understood. We are said to be understanding the truth of suffering. Once we understand the truth of suffering, we'll also understand 3 other things. We'll realize the 3 other things, namely abandoning what should be abandoned, and developing what should be developed, and realizing what should be realized. The 3 other things will also be realized once you understand dukkha sajja, how beneficial it is. So by noting this object, rising object, the truth of suffering, whatever arises, other 3 factors or other 3 things can also be accomplished, namely abandoning, realizing, and developing. So that's why there's just with one blow 4 shots, or one cut, one punch, or something like that. So if you do one thing, you accomplish 4 things at the same time. How valuable it is! And then this is quite, knowing that this is valuable, it's a valuable practice, you should not miss rising object, beginning with the main object of rising and falling. This is quite important, not to anticipate the unusual or sensational objects. You may think that, day by day, today also rising and falling, tomorrow the same thing, and day after tomorrow the same thing. You think that you are doing the same thing and you get fed up, get wearied, become commonplace, become lazy. Please don't think like this. These are dukkha sajja, the truth of suffering. Whatever arises in the body are dukkha sajja, and they are to be understood according to the formula. So whatever arises are to be noted and known. If you are if you are not satisfied with the usual object that you are noting, then you are said to be dissatisfied, unsatisfactoriness, or you feel dissatisfied with that. This amounts to one kilesa, dosa, ill will, anger, dissatisfaction. And if you expect better things, sensational, fresh, unusual objects, then you will be longing for something. That again is another defilement. This is greed, lobha. So nothing is good. So the practice here is to overcome, eradicate, do away with the lobha dosa, to be free of lobha dosa. So understanding this, we should not expect nor be dissatisfied with the usual object. And if you anticipate something which does not arise, you'll be longing for it, which is not good. It cannot be good. And if you are not satisfied with the usual object also, it cannot be wholesome, skillful. Like the locals say, you are washing your clothes. While washing your clothes, the clothes get more and more dirty. The more you wash, the more you get, the more the clothes get dirty or stained. Or when you are rowing a boat, and while you are rowing, the boat is sinking. So not to expect the unusual objects. Whatever arises are to be noted. Not to expect or long for new, fresh, unusual, sensational objects. Just to note, please note, the yogi's duty, yogis should understand that what is important is to note energetically and precisely with sustained mindfulness to see things in their true nature. In this way, what we just discussed, by practicing these skillful deeds, by practicing this noble path of constituents, every time an object rises, note it. If you fail to note it, if you are negligent, if you're not diligent, and if you forget, then this amounts to pamada in a subtle way. You are being heedless in a subtle way. And the corollary to this is whatever arises is noted with energy and precision. Then you are noting and knowing and practicing this noble path of 8 constituents, which is Adi Sila Kusala, extraordinary Kusala, skillfulness. Then this will amount to apamada in a subtle way. You become heedful in a subtle way. So in this way, so as not to allow this subtle form of pamada to arise, and only instead to let a subtle form of apamada to arise, what you should do is you should know what should be understood and understand it. That means noting and knowing it. What should be abandoned should be known, and that should be abandoned by not giving a chance to arise in your stream of consciousness. That is also by noting and not allowing it to arise. Then, what is to be realized should be known, and one should realize. That is the peace and extinction from fires, not to be consumed by fires, the kilesa fires. And what should be developed should be known and developed. That is to note the truth of suffering with the practice of satipatthana. Yogi's duty is just one thing, to note whatever arises energetically and precisely, and nothing else. So understanding this, one should then be able to know this, the Four Noble Truth, the truth of suffering, the truth of our origin, and the truth of extinction, and the truth of development. What is understood, what is to be understood, and what is to be abandoned is abandoned, and what is to be realized is realized, and what is to be developed is developed. So you should give preference or prominence to this Adi Kusala practice, and practice exert with the exertion of 3 stages of energy, the initial launching energy, and when you first practice your mindfulness, then when you experience difficulties and lack of energy, then you boost up your energy. That is the second stage of energy to overcome difficulties. And then the third stage by stages in order to reach the goal. Then you will be called dedicated yogi. If not, you will become a marginal yogi. So as not to become a marginal yogi, but be termed as dedicated. You should practice, note whatever arises in your body and mind all the time except the time you are fast asleep, with application of these 3 stages of energy, and may you be able to possess these exertion of energy And with this exhortation, we come to a close for today.